What makes Ymborg special? Actually, kind of nothing really, but that's quite intentional. Let me explain. We have no intention of creating something revolutionary. Ymborg is our attempt to find a set of rules that we can use to play Mordheim on a small board. We have no use for some sort of gimmicky one-trick pony thing to catch attention. We build what we want to play, and what we need is a solid base on which we can base all the fun stuff. We had previously played Kill Team and found that the core there was kind of good, but there were some issues. So we tried to borrow solutions from other games to fix those. But for some things we didn't find the solution, so we had invented ourselves. And then we tried to run this whole Franken build. There was a need to merge things and to streamline stuff, which led to yet more inventions. So the result is a selection of features, in our view the best ones, and that creates a sort of solid core without any sort of gimmicky features that will just obstruct future development. To make this a bit less fluffy, I will just run through the major sources and tell you what we stole from where and why. It will not be a complete guide because well, that would take forever, but rather a curated selection of the most important changes. Mordheim. I suppose this is the reason why we're here in the first place, and we really try to keep the feeling of a sort of low fantasy game. There are no, like shark riding elves or generals that take on an entire army by themselves. It's like kind of regular people struggling in a derelict city. It's exactly the same. The rules do feel kind of old though, which is not very strange. I mean, they feel like 5th or 6th edition Warhammer, which really isn't strange considering the people involved. But I don't play war games because I find it, like I think I'm cool. I do it because I got hooked when I was young, and we actually kept a bit of that vibe, I hope, in having some short rolls, because, well, as long as it doesn't get too much, it's kind of fun actually. Kill Team. If you know Kill Team, a lot of things will seem very familiar in Ymborg. Let's put it that way. That is not to say that things exist in Ymborg just because they exist in Kill Team. If you ask about any rule in Ymborg, we can tell you why it's there. But with that said, here is a list of things that made it pretty much without alterations. The size of the board. 22 by 30, it's exactly the same. We make no difference between like using a 60 by 80 centimeters board though. It doesn't really matter. Nothing in the game is that specific that you need to have exactly 22 by 30. But that said, I mean, you could play on a larger board as well, but it's balanced, or even a smaller one, but it's balanced around 22 by 30. The small number of members, we call them members, they call them operatives. But I mean, it's like, here I think it is like between, at least when we played, it was like between 5 and 16. In Ymborg, I think we have a regular warband is 7 members. There are some flavor teams that have, I think, perhaps 9 or even 10, but in general, it's between 5 and 10 miniatures. List building without points. At first, I just hated it. I thought it was so stupid, but it was mainly because I couldn't mix and match as much as I wanted to, and I realized that there is so much stuff going on in a way. And in Ymborg you can select individual, weapons and stuff for everyone anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And when you do list building without points, proper, I would say it's actually better. Wounds. Your members run around the board until they run out of wounds, being shot at or chopped at or whatever caused their demise. It is tempting, I think, to have some sort of system where you know, like the first time you get knocked down, you could die, but the second time is more likely, or something, you know, more fun like that. But in the end, the advantage of wounds is that you get a certain level of predictability, that you're sort of high or low on wounds, which gives a bit more player agency, and that is kind of a common theme on the things that we like here. So in the end, the wounds are still there. Alternating activations. There is enough room for you to take a sip of beer while your opponent activates one member, so we pass it back and forth to keep the game alive. But it's also in the dice, like in Kill Team, that you take turns using your dice as well, to keep the interaction. Turns. We play for 4 turns, just as Kill Team, but a game of Ymborg usually takes slightly longer because of various reasons, but one of them is that more members actually make it into the second round. And that is mainly down to your fantasy members not running around shooting lasers at each other and, you know, like whatnot. Fewer members have range weapons and their ranges are a bit more restricted, but a game still wraps up quite nicely in 4 rounds. There's usually not as much to do in your 4th round as it is the first and the second one. Then we have the secondaries, which are pretty much the same, but we made a small but I would say important improvement here. That is that each of them have a hidden part and a public part. That's all of them have the same thing. And the hidden part you do whatever it says here, and then you turn it around and say, hey, I did this thing and I got all these points. But to score the maximum points, you still need to do the public thing, which means that now your opponent have the opportunity to stop you from reaching all of these maximum points. So there are no nasty surprises, you know, like the last turn, like, hey, you lost turn 2, you just didn't know it until the last turn. It works really well, I would think. And now for some major changes. Armor dice. We added separate armor dice, and that is for 2 reasons. The first one is that it just feels very strange in a medieval game not having any sort of armor, especially in close combat. So we wanted to add that. It was one of the first features that we thought that we would fix, and it works quite well. And also there is a second thing here, is that as they can only be used to block, there is an increased interaction in the sort of alternating dice part. In Kill Team it was, at least when we played, it was very rare that anyone ever blocked. It was pretty much a countdown to your wounds. And it works. I mean, yeah, I think it's one of the major improvements actually. The skill system. If you take a look at the average trooper in Ymborg, you will see a weapon skill of 3. That is not the same as the hitting on 3+ as you commonly see in the Warhammer games, and a lot of other games as well. In Ymborg, all dice hit on a 5+. Your skill is simply the number of pips you have to fix your dice once you roll them. And that might seem a bit strange and convoluted at first, because it adds a few seconds of decision each time you roll dice, but it's there to bump player agency. Not perhaps in the way you think, you know, like trying to decide which pips to go where, because that is usually quite given. I mean, I've been running a lot of Python script and stuff, and in the end it sort of evens out with the regular hitting on 4+ or whatever. But it opens up for a lot of secondary things. Like nice things like your skill, the higher the better. Instead of some skills are higher the better and some skills are lower the better. But there are also other things down the line that we'll talk about, but in general it adds a bit more fidelity as well. You could go to like D10 but to solve that, but we'll keep the D6 because I like them. And yeah, all the secondary things are nice, you know, like what is your preferred thing? Like if you have a high skill and you roll fewer dice, you are pretty much guaranteed to do something. But it sort of washes out. If you want to have someone with a weapon that does like rolls a lot of dice, you also want a lot of skill to cover up for that stuff, because otherwise it's kind of a waste. That sort of thing comes in here. So there are other things down the line here as well we will talk about, but it is there to bump player agency, but not perhaps in the actual roll when you only decide for your little pips. I hope that thing got through. I think this will be the hardest thing to explain, actually. To summarize the difference between dice in Kill Team and dice in Ymborg, I would say that Ymborg is slightly more detailed. You could say that for each activation in Ymborg, there is like one more thing to roll for, and each roll contains like one or perhaps two more dice. That does mean that there is more time spent rolling dice and also deciding upon dice. And we're fully aware that this can get like totally out of hand pretty quickly. So we actually spend more time, like removing stuff and streamlining things than we did adding things. And I think in the end, it is a better result, but it totally depends on what you'd like. If you don't like the alternating dice in Kill Team, Ymborg is not for you. As simple as that. But I think in the end, it is a good combination of dice that we have. 3D. We try to make the entire game like fully 3D. You might say, hey, Kill Team is 3D, and I would say, no, not really. It's more like 2.5D. Yes, you can shoot from above and stuff like that, but unless you have like specific planes to go between, the game gets kind of weird. And we tried to decouple all of this, and we instead based like line of sight and shooting and stuff like that on major body parts, which is like your head, your torso, your arms, and your legs. And the rules are quite simple, like it's much more what you see is what you get. If you see the entire figure, just fire away. But if at least one body part is hidden, then you get a small penalty. If only one part is visible, then you get a larger penalty. Quite simple. And it actually works in full 3D. It doesn't really matter. It obviously means that, like one member can get a free shot at another one, while that member can't really shoot back, like hardly hit the other one. But that's just like, reality. It's just not based on different sort of sightline shenanigans connected to the base. You could actually play Ymborg without any bases. As long as your miniature can stand there is no actual need for the base. True. So to summarize the difference between Kill Team and Ymborg, I would say that, well, apart from all the laser shooting in Kill Team, I would say that an Ymborg game is slightly more detailed, which means it takes slightly longer time and there is a bit more decisions to make. But it's not a huge difference. I mean, the basics are still there, and Ymborg is still, yes, it takes slightly longer time to play, but I would say it's still comfortably one evening game, and that is including having a beer and a chit chat as well along the way. So the next one up is X-Wing. I would say that this is a really great design. The core of this stuff. We've stolen two things and it has inspired one of the absolute major ones. The thing I like about it is that it's kind of a simple core that you can do a lot of stuff with. And even if some later ships have like a lot of shenanigans going on, there is a sense that if you fly well, you aim well. And you can get really, really far even with like simple ships if you just pilot them well. And I think that's really inspiring. And one of the smaller things we've stolen is like the 3 different ranges you can shoot at, which means that if you maneuver your little miniature to a good spot where you find your opponent like close by, you get a small bonus. So it gets easier to shoot someone. While at the same time you have a slightly higher risk of getting charged or something. So I think it's a good, once again, thing that adds a bit of player agency. This sort of fly well, aim well philosophy has also been a great inspiration to our reworked action economy. And I'll explain that through the Space Marine sock problem, which comes from an old Kill Team game we played like the first fall when it arrived. And it was me playing some sort of Space Marine kill team with 3 action points each. And I was standing in some sort of good spot, so I fired at someone, but then I couldn't do it again, because in kill team you can only do each action once each turn. And so instead I moved behind the wall not to get shot back, obviously an improvement, but then there was still 1 action point to go, and there was nothing useful that I could do for it. There is no way I could like prepare for the next turn or something, and that's the name of the problem, you know, like it could not even change its socks to perform better the next turn. And that annoyed me quite a lot, and it's not fly well, aim well. So the solution we came up with is that in Ymborg you can actually perform any action as many times as you want, but for each time you repeat something you get a small penalty. So if you fire twice at someone, they are more likely to hit you when they shoot back. And it works really well, and I'm quite proud of it actually. So I advise you, if nothing else, I would advise you to play the game to experience this one, because it really adds more player agency. More player agency, you can push your miniatures further at an increased risk. I really like that. Then we get to one of the best features of X-Wing, I think. It's the focus token. If you fly well and don't bump into anyone or have to make little adjustments in the end, you can spend your action getting one of these little tokens. And that one enables you to score hits that otherwise would not be hits. So obviously we stole this one to Ymborg as well. And I think it really adds to the fly well, aim well thing. Because here you can make the choice, you know, do you want to spend 1 action setting up, getting one of these little tokens, which gives you 1 extra pip to your skill, whatever skill you're trying to perform, if you try to jump, if you try to dodge, if you try to shoot someone or fight in close combat. So will you stop and get one of these and then fire, or do you want to take the chances and rush and fire twice instead? I think it really adds a bit to the player agency as well. So the whole combination is actually really nice. So in conclusion, I would say that even though there are not many like direct copies of the rules from X-Wing, I would say it's like a really major influence on Ymborg. The next, there is no book, so I will just flash the Mordheim one, because it's Mordheim City of the Damned, the computer game. And it's been a great inspiration for the sort of bleak look on life that we try to encompass here in Ymborg. And that is actually the only sort of lore direction that is present in the core, because we try to convey the sense that from the original Mordheim actually, that this is not, you know, like your Lord of the Rings heroes charting about. It's regular pub people trying to make a living in a derelict city. So while it should not be too overwhelming, there should be a sense of struggle. So we added some tests for climbing and stuff like that, so you're not really certain on anything. You can fail pretty much anywhere, and when you pick up your little charge that you're looking for, it could backfire. It can actually hurt your back. We even stole the concept of fumble dice from Turnip 28, which I don't have either here printed. But as stated, I mean, it is the only thing that we actually try to convey in the core rules. Otherwise, the core rules are very neutral. But it's important, because, I mean, we're trying to play Mordheim. We can't do that without some sort of struggle. But there is also one thing really connected to the action economy, and that is stances. In a computer game, you can select a stance which alters your behavior between your activations. And we pretty much stole this one straight off, you know. You can select the stance that says that if you get shot at, you get 1 extra dodge die. Stuff like that. And it works really well, and it really mitigates the Space Marine sock problem. So I'm just really happy that we have this one. Last but certainly not least, we have Forbidden Psalm, which is like the skirmish version of Mörkborg. Kind of a fun fact actually. For a brief moment, Ymborg was actually called Mörkborg, because I was looking around for this sort of cheesy 80s fantasy name, because that kind of inspires me, and I thought about the Dark Castle. But I thought it sounded a bit too generic, so I thought, let's do it in Swedish instead, which is Mörkborg. Only then did I find out that there was already a game called that, and it was kind of adjacent as well, so it got changed to Ymborg. Which, to be quite fair, still contains the name Borg, even though it's not for that reason. But here it's not so much the rules, which, well, they are kind of inspiring in their simplicity, but it's mainly the artwork. I do all the art for Ymborg myself, and I'm not a professional artist by any means, even though I hope to improve over time, but I'm not too stressed either. But the inspiring thing here is that the whole misfit vibe, and it's really nice to see what you can do with, don't get me wrong, with what you can do with stuff even if you can't draw, because this looks nice even though it's not a landscape picture, is it? And it's also the format of the book. I really like this format. I think this one is like 80 plus pages of A5 paper, and Ymborg would be equivalent, would be 60 pages or something, because it is 60 pages and it's A5 pages as well, so it would be kind of similar. It's kind of a small book, not like a huge tome. But if there's something that will be in the rules from here, it will be soon when we get to the sort of warband development and progress for the members, and I really like the flaws. I think they will show up in some way. I already had a plan for that, but it will be coming. And I encourage you, if you want to build an Ymborg warband, to use this little warband generator here in the end, because I think that would be really fitting in. I want to do that at some point. I've not done it yet, but that would be a fun challenge. I think that's it. I mean, it's getting late and my throat is getting sore. So let's wrap things up here. To summarize it all, I would say that the best description of Ymborg would be its kill team with a misfit vibe, which is kind of close to the short description of Kill Team Mordheim. But there are some other changes as well. I mean, I would say it's a bit more detailed than Kill Team, but more importantly, I would say that there is also an increased player agency as well. And if that sounds interesting, just check it out for free. You will find the link to Discord down below. And until I see you there, don't forget to enjoy your hobby.